Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. And it's my great pleasure to welcome today's program Nick Carretta, who is the president of UltraShipTMS. And we're going to talk today about removing the barriers to TMS implementation and benefits. Basically, looking at it from two different perspectives. One, from the perspective of the fact that there's many shippers out there that still do not have a TMS. So try to understand, maybe what some of those barriers are to implementing a TMS and what those shippers can do about it. And then from the other perspective, for those shippers that do have a TMS and maybe have already captured the low-hanging fruit, then the question becomes, how can you then achieve the next level of benefits, right? What might be some of the barriers or some of the areas where shippers might be leaving money on the table? So those are kind of the two big questions we're going to explore today. I just want to remind all of you that are joining that part of our goal here at Talking Logistics is to make this an interactive conversation. So, as Nick and I are having our discussion, if you have a question for Nick, feel free to post it via the question button or via the chat feature. And certainly, if we've got time and it's a good question, we'll try to weave it into the conversation. If you are joining us as a visitor, you will have to register first in order to be able to ask a question. So with that, Nick, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So Nick, one of the things that I always like to ask my guests, and before we kind of dive into the topic, is how they got involved in the logistics industry. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your career path, how you got started in logistics and transportation, and what your current role and responsibilities are there at UltraShipTMS?
Okay, well, thanks for having me. As far as how I got started in logistics, more or less I was born into it. It's, I guess you could say, in my blood. I'm third generation transportation. My father owned a trucking company here in New Jersey. He had about 1,000 trucks on the road at any given time, dry and temperature controlled transportation. My grandfather did transportation as well, driving a truck of coal and ice back and forth to Jersey City. And I basically grew up around trucking my whole life. So when my father had his operation, I would go down to the terminal. I worked in just about every department there was there, from the shop, the mechanics. I worked in safety, driver recruiting. I worked in the dispatch, human resources. And I really did a tour of all the different departments and areas as I grew up each summer, little mini internships. After that, after college, my father started a freight brokerage operation doing third-party transportation and shipping, and that was in 1996. And then in 2001, we organized an independent company and launched our UltraShipTMS platform. That platform started out with our first offering, which was a spot quoting tool that was adopted by Kmart and subsequently by Kraft, ConAgra, Land O'Lakes, and Easton Bell. And it's developed over the years into a full spectrum TMS product that does everything from fleet optimization to private fleet management, common carrier tendering, freight payment and reporting. And that's used currently by names like Purdue Farms, Cody Inc., and other shippers that you'd recognize. As far as my current roles and responsibilities, president of the company, chief salesman, product evangelist, but overall I provide strategic direction for the company. I make sure that we're constantly driving innovation, coming up with new ideas, putting new features and functionality into the software that keeps us on the edge of emerging trends. Try to deliver the best value possible to our customers. And in doing that, we're trying to constantly infuse the perspective of what happens on a day-to-day operation, blend that into the software, and overall drive down the cost of the software for potential shippers and users.
Great background there, Nick. I mean, I think it's always interesting. I mean, certainly a lot of folks in the logistics industry started out as a kind of a family-owned business. Certainly a lot of 3PLs remain family-owned businesses, and multiple generations, being involved. I think it's also interesting how you were able to augment that operational experience on the trucking and transportation side and kind of move into a few years back into the technology realm, which is obviously continues to play a bigger role in logistics and transportation. Um, so, in your current role, I mean, you mentioned some of the clients you work with, so you obviously talk with a lot of shippers, from a variety of different industries. What are you hearing from them, in terms of the transportation challenges and opportunities they're facing? What are some of their objectives in the coming year that you're hearing from kind of the shippers out there that you work with?
Well, I'll start with the challenges. I think everybody knows that people are concerned about capacity and capacity issues. Basically, the supply and demand over how many trucks are out there and getting access to those trucks and different resources, not just trucks, but air, ocean resources as well. The regulatory burden that I think is adding to that capacity strain. Things like the lack of drivers that are also part of that. And with those things, they're challenged with constantly balancing service and cost. So clearly, there's a premium to be paid for higher service, better on-time delivery, but finding that right sweet spot where you're not overpaying, but you're still getting the service and the on-time delivery to your customers that you need to have. So challenge-wise, I think that it's really balancing that cost and service burden and combating the different regulations and requirements that are out there now in the changing landscape of the transportation industry. Overall objectives for this year is the second part of the question. I get a lot of people looking to upgrade TMS software. Obviously, that's what we do, and a lot of the conversations that I have are around that. People that have a platform in place are not necessarily happy with that platform, aren't getting the most out of it, or have multiple platforms and they're looking to consolidate it into one platform. That's also something we're seeing quite often. I see quite a bit of people still installing their first TMS software as the software becomes more affordable. You see more and more companies looking to do it. You see companies hiring people with experience implementing TMSs at previous jobs and organizations. So really looking to gain the knowledge about how to do a TMS selection process and implementation correctly. And then from customers, I also get a lot of buzz around optimization, consolidation, and planning. And that's not just combining LTL shipments into multi-stop truckloads, but doing PO and order consolidation, and then also doing private fleet optimization, trying to get better utilization out of drivers, equipment, and really find the best way to strategically deploy a private fleet within their network, finding that right balance between private fleet and common carrier.
Yeah, Nick, I think a lot of the things you brought up there kind of echo, what I've been hearing as well from a lot of shippers. Certainly, capacity is one of the big concerns that they have, and they've been having for a few years. And I think for a lot of shippers, they know that there's a risk involved with capacity moving forward. Because of the economy, it hasn't kind of shown up yet, but they're beginning to take action today to prepare for potential capacity crunch down the road. And some of the things you talked about, obviously technology and transportation, putting technology in place to be able to run their operations more effectively is something they're doing. And then you talked about optimization and looking at private fleet and dedicated and things like that. Certainly that's another strategy that I hear a lot of shippers taking to kind of mitigate the risk of a capacity crunch out there. So let's talk about the technology now and specifically TMS. Like I mentioned in my opening comments, despite the fact that TMS solutions have been around for a long time, despite the fact that you've got software as a service and a variety of different more affordable deployment models today, you still have a relatively large percentage of companies that still do not have a TMS. Especially in the small, mid-sized segment of the market. Why do you think, that is? I mean, why do you think still companies are still managing their transportation with, fax machines and spreadsheets and things like that? What are some of the reasons from your perspective? What are some of the barriers and what can they do about it to overcome those barriers?
Okay, so the biggest barrier that I see is getting the internal alignment around a project like this. a TMS project, it requires not just a transportation manager to want this software, but he also has to convince the other stakeholders within the organization, such as the CFO, the president, maybe the people in purchasing or procurement, the distribution people. So there are a lot of stakeholders, and I think increasingly what I see is getting the organizational alignment. From past experience, they know what the benefits are. They know it helps control cost. They know that there are increased or there are efficiencies that are gained through the day-to-day operation of a TMS. So for them, the biggest barrier is choosing the right solution and then choosing a solution that's going to deliver value to the organization and then getting the support from the other stakeholders within the organization to move that project forward. I would say that's the biggest thing, getting the organizational alignment, convincing the C-level suite of the benefits. In order to do that, they need to be able to measure the ROI and present a clear case for delivering ROI with a solution like this. And quite often what I see is a shipper that knows that there's benefits but isn't able to clearly make a business case for a TMS, mostly because a lot of the different product literature out there is going to give you, is going to make claims or assumptions that you can attain a certain amount of savings, but to truly find that savings within their network and to map out a clear business plan that's going to show you what's your payback horizon for software investment like this, what's your total cost of ownership for an investment like this, and how do I ultimately make it pay for itself? So with that, shippers need to know what it's going to cost me to install the software, what the implementation fees are going to be for the software, what the monthly recurring fees are going to be on the software. Are there hidden costs or variable costs such as training and support that might not be included in my price? Once they have then that total cost of ownership by looking at all those components, they need to then go map out the savings plan or the ROI for the software. So knowing their network, knowing what a realistic assumption would be for savings in year 1, 2, and 3 of a project, and typically trying to find a quick payback horizon for an investment like this. If they can demonstrate all these things, if they can put it together in a clear business case, then selling it internally is not that hard. But actually coming to that conclusion, understanding what a particular software package will give them as far as benefits, what they can expect to save as a percentage on whether it's load optimization or more accurate freight payment, and then putting that next to the true cost of the TMS, that tends to be a challenge for many shippers. I see that quite a lot. I saw that a lot in 2013. And what we've done as an organization is we've started to map out a clear path for a shipper. We've put together a white paper that we'll be releasing this month on mapping out ROI and understanding where the return on investment is going to come from. And we plan on releasing that on our website later this month, which is the UltraShipTMS website. It'll be on the resources section, and I'm sure they can get that URL from the Talking Logistics site as well.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point. I mean, one of the one of the posts that I did earlier this year was five New Year's resolutions for supply chain logistics executives, and one of them was learn to speak the language of the CFO, and I think that's it. I think you touched upon that. Sometimes it's if you come at it from a transportation perspective or a logistics perspective, you can say, okay, if we implement this TMS, we can improve on-time delivery from 92% to 96%. And to a CFO, that's absolutely meaningless, right? Because he or she is interested in how is this going to impact the things that he or she really is most focused on, which is items that impact the P&L and the balance sheet, right? So understanding how you can position the value proposition of a technology investment like a TMS to being able to tie that to the P&L and the balance sheet as an example, I think is very important. As I think about this, and I was listening to you, do you see, I think for some companies it might be that obviously technology alone, technology is one piece of the equation, right? You also need people. and there's a lot of buzz these days about there being a talent shortage out in the industry. Are you seeing that or hearing that from some of your customers that are saying, hey, we can put the technology in, but we just don't feel like we have the people, the internal expertise to use it. Is that a barrier? Do you see that as another factor for some shippers?
I absolutely do. I've run into that firsthand in a couple situations where uh, I'm dealing with a transportation executive at either a VP level or a director level, and one of the things that they tell me is, I'm ready to do it, I'm ready to move forward, I just have to backfill a couple positions within the organization so I have the right people to do this implementation. And that becomes a challenge in itself, because quite honestly, when somebody comes into an organization and is new to an organization, they don't have the experience with the network or the shipping patterns, and there's a lot of risk there as well. But I do definitely see a shortage of people that have good hands-on experience implementing transportation management systems and getting the benefit out of those systems as well. You see it in many places, so that's one example in someone who's looking to select a TMS. You also see it with people that have selected a TMS, they've had a TMS in place for a number of years now, and they're not getting the benefit out of that because they've had kind of brain drain at the organization. People that know the TMS, they know how it works, they know how to get information out of it, are no longer there, and there's kind of a lost knowledge in that they have a package that's an enterprise level package, but they're not getting any benefit out of it, and as such they're out there looking for a new package to replace it or to augment it. And sometimes it's not just the software, it's the talent that is using the software, or they don't have access to the training they need for new features or things along those lines. So that's a very valid point, and I see that quite often also.
Great, great. So let's, and you touched upon it right now. So let's talk now about, companies that already kind of got over that hurdle, right? They were able to make the investment. They've been using a TMS. And a lot of times, particularly if you've gone from managing your transportation using spreadsheets and fax machines and manual processes, you put in a TMS, that first year, first 2 years, you can capture a lot of those low-hanging fruit benefits, a lot of those things that you might have put in that business plan or the business case. But now you're in year 3, year 4, year 5 of using a TMS, and you've kind of captured, that low-hanging fruit. How else can a shipper now that, once you've captured that low-hanging fruit, where else can they, save money? I guess to put it differently, where are shippers that already have a TMS, where are they leaving money or other benefits on the table today, and how can they, capture those benefits?
Well, typically the low-hanging fruit are the soft benefits, the efficiencies, the automation. That's just basically going to smooth an order or a shipment through the system and minimize the amount of hands-on touches that it requires to handle it. So the assumption would be that they've done a lot of automation. They're using a lot of automated tendering and rules to move the shipments along. And then now, as you say, they've gathered that low-hanging soft benefit, and now they want to start going after the real dollars that can be saved. In order to do that, you really have to have good visibility, not to any shipment in particular, but to the whole of your shipments and the whole of your data. So the shippers that we're talking about are shippers that not getting the visibility they expected or anticipated, not able to get the reporting or the data that they need to start really affecting the changes. So you're typically talking about a shipper that has a TMS in place, but they don't have the metrics in place, or they don't know how to interpret the metrics that they do have in order to find where the savings are. So metrics that you would want to look at if you have a TMS and you're not getting the savings that you're expecting, or you're looking to get that next level of savings, I would say you need to be looking at things like your tender times, your carrier acceptance, your average order lead time, your on-time percentage by carrier, and historical lane rates, planned budgeted cost in a lane versus actual cost in a lane. So as you start to look at these things and you have a solid data structure for capturing these metrics, you really have to then interpret them and determine what do they mean. So where does lead time cost me more money? Where does lack of lead time cost me as a shipper more money? Where is my on-time percentage costing me money, such as maybe there are chargebacks in a given lane, and this can be isolated back to the lead time on the order from when the order was originated to when it had to pick up, or maybe it can be traced back to the root cause as not having the proper carrier selection. So there's a lot of different things that you can look at as far as costing and metrics. If you have a good TMS in place, that you can start to do root cause analysis and start to determine, why am I not seeing the savings that I want, or why am I spending more than I had planned to spend at any given period, be it a quarter, a month, or even a year. So having a detailed carrier scorecard, having a very good lane history, having accurate cost data that you can go back and you can look at what a true cost of a shipment was, not just the line haul, but the line haul, the fuel, any accessorials, any chargebacks, tying that back to the original shipment and being able to do analysis on that. When you get this information and you can do a deep dive into your shipping patterns, that's when you start to be able to dig more cost savings out of a network. One of the examples I just mentioned was order lead time, and typically what we've done, we'll go back with a shipper and we'll help them do an analysis of their entire TMS. We'll do an automation analysis that shows them where they're seeing automation and where they're not, but then we'll do other analysis such as this lead time analysis. And what we've seen in doing a lead time analysis is there's a correlation between lead time and cost. So that's probably not a surprise, that, an obvious statement. The more lead time I have, the better carrier I can get. The better carrier I get, the better my on-time percentage is going to be, and hopefully the better cost. But when you can look at the data and you can actually prove that out, that's very powerful. Now, a lot of TMSs will have that information, but does the user have access to it, and does the user have the knowledge to do something with that data and to interpret it and to turn it into cost savings? So while it's obvious to say lead time and cost are connected, it might not be obvious on how to actually make that connection, how to look at the data, and how to isolate down specific lanes where that is a problem. And by isolating specific lanes or specific shipments, or it might be even a specific customer, once you have that, now you can target that for the true cost savings and start to go back to the customer and say, customer, can I get more lead time? Or maybe it's a carrier issue and you can go back to the carrier and say, look, I'm giving you ample lead time, but you're not able to get these delivered on time. So getting to that root cause is important, and having good data to get you to that root cause is very important. Just to look at my notes real quick, let's see. Right. You don't want a tool that's going to allow you to execute efficiently, but only you need to have efficient execution and then good visibility to the historical data as to what happened, so you can go back and start looking for that root cause analysis. And then I had another note here that you mentioned, not to run on, but about having the expertise on staff and having the talent to execute against this. So an organization might want to consider, do they have the right resources in place from a human capital perspective to have someone that's going to be able to do BI and business intelligence, really look at the trends and the patterns within the data to start to come up with some savings opportunities within the network. And that quite often is in other areas as well.
Yeah, so it sounds like, to paraphrase a little bit here, really, at the core of being able to kind of get to the next level of benefits and cost savings and so forth, is really having very granular, data around your transportation operations and network. Having the BI dashboards and analytics capability to really do deep dive analysis into the variety of different metrics that you need to have or should have in place to see where the deviations are coming from, based on compared to what your expectations are, and that's going to point you in the areas of where there's leakage, if you will, in terms of planned versus actual. And then I think the third piece is, I think, where a lot of companies, like you mentioned there at the end, is having the talent internally, the people internally that can, it's one thing to collect the data and have the dashboards and have the technology tools, but is then to have someone to be able to, recognize those trends and those areas that need attention, and then know what to do, to correct, right?
That's absolutely true. And to be proactive, have scheduled intervals which you know you're going to look at certain metrics. Make sure you're diligently reviewing them every week and every month, and making sure that you're using these tools that you have properly. Really take advantage of the data that you have. So I think it's what you said. You summarized my points well. It's having that ability to really get into that granular detail on shipments. Um, Not that you want to do that in every one, but you want to be able to do that in when the metrics tell you to do so. So knowing what those metrics are, reviewing them, BI and big data, business intelligence, that's very important right now for a company to be competitive. So having that, and then having somebody on staff that's expert with that so that they can interpret that, and then they could look for patterns and sub-patterns and frequencies and things along those lines that are really going to tell you what's happening within your network. I mean, there are instances where we look at the data and we see that the lead time on any given day doesn't necessarily need to be the same. So a lead time on a Wednesday as opposed to a lead time on a Friday has a different impact on the cost. So you can look at different trends within your network, and you can really boil it down to a daily or a weekly or monthly in many different ways, and having that talent to do that is important.
The other thing that, as you were talking, that kind of sparked a thought, particularly with a lot of companies that have a TMS, from what I've seen, I'm kind of curious if you see the same thing as well, and if it's something that you help customers address, is the fact that, a TMS is kind of a living, breathing solution, because, you can set up a TMS today and be up and running today, and you've set it up based on what your network and your operational realities are today. But we all know that, 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now, your transportation operations could be completely different. You may be working with different carriers, your rates might be different. You might have picked up new customers along the way, maybe dropped off a few customers, picked up new suppliers, so on and so forth. And I think what a lot of companies fail to recognize is that they have to continuously tune the TMS, right? The TMS, whether it's the constraints that you put in there or the rates that are in there, because your network is changing, you have to kind of maintain, that TMS as well. So it's almost like a car, right? I mean, you can, if you get that brand new car, it's going to be run beautifully, in those early days. But if you never maintain it and change the oil and tune it up and all that, it's going to start to degrade over time. It's the same thing with the TMS. It's going to run great that first year or those first few months because it's brand new and it's a reflection of your current reality. But over time, if you're not keeping up and fine tuning that TMS to make it reflect your current operating realities, that's another area where you can start, seeing some degradation in benefits. I mean, do you see that? And how do you help customers kind of keep their solution in tune, if you will, to their current operating realities?
That you're right on the money with that. I have to say that if you're looking at the same metrics day one of your TMS as you are at the end of the third year, you probably haven't matured and you haven't evolved to really start to get the benefit out of the TMS. You really have to stay on top of the basic metrics and review that on a periodic basis. And then you have to develop and change the metrics. If you've been using a TMS for 3 years, you have 3 years worth of data that you didn't have going into that project. So now you have different things that you can look at and analyze. What we do is we meet with a customer at the very minimum annually, and we'll have an annual review, face-to-face. In the interim, we'll do periodic refreshes. We'll look at the data with them. For us, installing the TMS and making sure our customers get the value out of the TMS is very much about the relationship that we have with them as much as it is about the software. So being involved with the customer, being accessible to them, and making sure that you're involved, helping them learn what they can get out of a TMS is important. Otherwise, what you're going to find is like what we see with many of the opportunities we get is that someone has a package that they installed at one point and it no longer meets their organizational needs. So they've evolved as an organization, they've matured as an industry professional, but they haven't brought the TMS up to speed with them. So now they've kind of outlived its usefulness. And what you need to do to avoid that from happening is really work closely with your TMS provider and vendor. Make sure you're getting as much knowledge transfer as you can from them, and that they're bringing to you ideas as far as best practices and standards that they're seeing from other implementations that they're doing, so that you can truly benefit from that partnership that you have with them.
Great, great. I've got just a couple of more questions. I just want to remind folks that if you do have a question for Nick before we wrap up, now is the time to ask it either via the question button or the chat feature. And if you are attending as a visitor, you do have to register first. So Nick, let's go back now to what you're hearing from shippers and now kind of look at it more from the technology side. And we probably already touched upon some of these things, but what capabilities are they looking for in a TMS to help them address those challenges and opportunities that you talked about before? Any functionality capabilities that kind of rise to the surface, common threads that you hear from both clients as well as prospects that you talk to?
Most of the requests that I get are around the reporting capabilities, the different metrics that are available, and different scorecards that are available within the system. Most people I talk to are looking for a very good comprehensive carrier scorecard that's going to help them look at carrier performance and isolate instances where there are performance issues with the carriers that they've selected. We get a lot of questions around live dashboards. Exception management is very important as well. They want to see what kind of notifications the system generates as far as exceptions, what kind of history or summary screens they have available to them to see all the exceptions. They don't like being surprised by problems within the network. They want to know about them before they hear about it from other stakeholders within the company. So a lot of it is around scorecards, metrics, dashboards, and really being able to look at their operational performance at any given moment and know exactly what's going on within their network. Another thing that I see, and we touched on that quite a bit, another thing that I see that we haven't touched on is the ability to really adjust to capacity constraints, adjust to spikes in demand, and to have a good spot bidding tool within their TMS, a tool that allows them to deal with exceptions that they deal with on a day-to-day basis, but does not force them to handle this outside of the system or through outside manual processes. So they want a good spot bidding tool that's going to allow them to tap into capacity within their own network and get more utilization of the carriers that they work with already. And then I see a lot of people looking for optimization and load planning abilities within the TMS. So while a few years ago the biggest thing was, can I do automatic tendering and automatic notifications to carriers, that's become commonplace. And what we're seeing now is shippers are realizing there's only so much savings that can be gotten out of my network as far as negotiating better rates with the carriers, and they realize that a lot of the savings come from optimization and load planning, and that's building better loads, building shipments more quickly and efficiently so that you can get them to the carrier sooner, that you can be using the minimal, executing with the minimal amount of miles or driver resources, and really building the fullest shipment possible, maximizing the cube. So most people I talk to are looking for an optimizer tool that will automate a lot of those features and allow them to do that quickly and efficiently. And then the other trend I'm seeing quite a bit is the private fleet capabilities and the ability to manage both your private fleet a dedicated fleet, and your common carrier resources with one platform, and not have to use two separate platforms to interact with any of the carrier types. So many of the people that I talk to are really looking for that holistic platform that's going to provide them optimization and then provide them the TMS functionality to all the different carrier types that they work with in a single platform.
Yeah, no, I think that those are all things I hear from shippers as well. You know, when they when I talk to them in terms of looking at different TMS solutions out there and the capabilities that they're looking for. And certainly, you brought up the spot tendering. There's the old phrase, dialing for diesels, right? So trying to get away from having to pick up the phone and hunt down someone that can come pick up the load because they've exhausted the routing guide, or their preferred carrier is not shipping. So is there a way to automate that, right? Is there a way to kind of reach out to your community of carriers to be able to do that in a more efficient and smarter way of doing that? And that last point you brought up, I think ties back to what we talked about with capacity and ways of trying to mitigating the risks of a potential capacity constraint, particularly in the truckload market, by being able to better and more holistically manage the different transportation options available to them, whether it's not only common carrier, but also private fleet and dedicated fleet. So, and trying to do that within a single platform. So, to wrap up, you talked about earlier, the importance of kind of building the business case, right? In terms of for those shippers that don't have a TMS, and that's kind of one of the barriers is kind of building an effective business case. So what advice would you give to shippers, particularly those that don't have a TMS, in terms of overcoming that hurdle and making 2014, if you will, the year that they move away from manual processing to using a transportation management system? If you were putting together kind of the business case, what key points would you emphasize?
The first point I would say is give me a call and we'll help you out. Beyond that, I would say you really need to do a deep dive internally and have some understanding of your network and self-realization of what you're looking for. So I would say do a deep dive internally, do your best to map out your current processes early, really make sure that you document what your needs are, what your network topology looks like, what's your shipment volume, what percentage of freight by mode are you shipping. Really understand that network. You'd be surprised. I talk to people that call me, they know they want a TMS software, they have a general idea of how much they ship by mode, but they don't know their total annual freight spend. They don't know their volume breakdown. They don't know a lot of the frequencies, and that's because these organizations are so large that often one person doesn't know all that. That information is within silos of control, and you might not have someone that really can understand inbound, outbound, total spend, breakdown by mode, and volume. So really, in order to map out a good ROI plan, you need to know these things. So do that discovery before you go to the TMS provider. Have a good set of facts and data and business processes that you can share so that you have realistic expectations, and the provider that you work with has a good idea of the features and functionalities you're truly going to need to find the right TMS. Once you've gotten all that information, the next thing you need to do is map out your plan for the return on investment. What we've done for many customers is we've helped them do that. They'll give us the statistics on their network, they'll give us some process flows, and then we'll come to them and we'll help them map out a realistic ROI plan for how they're going to pay for this software, how they're going to get a return on the investment, and where they're going to get the savings from within their network. If they do these things before selecting a provider, and if they've mapped out a clear ROI plan, that's going to allow them to right-size this solution and engage with a provider that's going to provide value to them, and not wind up with a software package that sits on the shelf partially installed or isn't fully utilized after the first few months and doesn't really get the value. I would also make sure that you can partner with a provider who is committed to ensuring you have what you need to get those savings and is willing to contractually obligate themselves to that. And what I mean by that is if a provider has strong processes and methodologies for doing these implementations, for doing design and discovery prior to starting the project, they should be willing to stand behind those policies and procedures and methodologies and guarantee that when they've completed their implementation, you're going to have a working software solution that meets your needs, helps you ship more efficiently, on time, deliver more on time, and actually get the savings that you need to get in order to pay for this project. So finding the right provider that's really willing to kind of stand behind their work and has good processes for implementation and guarantee that you're going to be satisfied with the solution is very important, because I see too many shippers right now with the package that they have installed where they don't have the support that they need to finish the implementation. They don't have the talent on staff to fully utilize the TMS, and they're not in a position to use it on a day-to-day basis to reduce costs for the company overall.
Great all-around advice, Nick. Especially the first point that you brought up in terms of some of the prerequisite work that's involved in terms of really, setting that baseline, if you will, of where you are today and answering those questions. I'm also, always surprised by the fact that a lot of shippers don't know what their total annual spend is, annually, by mode or by carrier, or by division, so forth, because like you said, a lot of that information is spread out across multiple different systems or multiple different people. So absolutely, getting that data, that information, creating that baseline is certainly an important first step. With that, we're out of time. We didn't get any questions live today, but certainly if any of you watching, attending today, or any of you that are watching this on demand, find this episode on talkinglogistics.com and post a question there, and I'm sure Nick will be happy to respond to it then. We basically scratched the surface on this topic, but I think you brought up a lot of great points, Nick, and I certainly appreciate you making the time to be with us today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I look forward to more engagements such as this in the future.
Great, and thank you all for joining us today, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.